to approve the agenda. Is there any comment from the commission? Anything we missed? Dee, you want to go ahead? Actually, Charlotte, let's start with Charlotte, as long as Charlotte might have something to mention.
I only raised my hand to let you know we don't have to approve the agenda at this meeting because you approved it at the previous meeting. I think this was a leftover from our very first meeting when you hadn't yet met. So I think you could skip to item number 3 if you would like.
Dee, did you have any objections to that?
Well, I just have a question. We don't have an agenda item on this agenda where we actually talk about redistricting and remapping or anything. And I'm wondering why.
So this is Sherry Johnson. So we will be talking about that during Leaf's segment when we talk about the census data.
Okay, so we're not actually working on the redistricting part yet. Then we're still, is that correct?
Leaf, could you answer that question, Leaf, if you wouldn't mind?
Well, it's my understanding that it's up to the commission. There is a question though, and I don't know if Charlotte can help us with this, but census data is out there by block level for public law 94-171 data that we're supposed to use for redistricting. And it's been out there for more than a week. So we've waited that week period, and we can show district boundaries at a public meeting, as far as I know. The only caveat to that is I'm not sure if we were supposed to wait until the state actually came out with their adjusted data. But there are plenty of maps out there showing the current districts. And I'd done some work to using the 2020 census data, show what the current population is for each of the existing districts, which be information that you should probably take a look at. So you can see, how we stand currently with the new numbers. Other than that, it's unless Charlotte thinks that we should not draw maps, we haven't really obtained a lot of public input, which is what we're supposed to do before we start drawing lines. And then, we can get into the whole discussion of, are we going to get public input? How do we get more? Et cetera, et cetera. And I think part of on the agenda is to look at what public input has come in.
Through the chair, if you'd like me to answer the question, and I can do that. We are supposed to wait until the state releases the prison adjusted data and wait for 1 week after that. I think that data is forthcoming, although I don't have an update on it. And at this stage, we're really still at the communities of interest collecting input, and members of the public can still submit maps identifying and describing a narrative of their communities of interest. I don't think we're at the stage of drafting maps. Like Leaf had said, we want to collect public input before we prepare draft maps. Looking at the agenda, we have staff updates that will involve bringing some of that input to you, and an update from Leaf on the census data. And I think that was when he would share with you the maps with population, the current district boundaries with population, the recently released census data updated by population to show you those adjustments or areas that we may be wanting to look at. But at this point, I don't think we're at the stage of drafting maps until we have that final released state prison inmate adjusted data, and that should be soon. Okay.
But Charlotte, do I understand that it would not be against any rules in Leaf's section, sort of to discuss a little bit of what might be possible based on this data. I know that Dee in past meetings has expressed a desire to at least voice some of the unspoken reasons for joining the committee beyond what Supervisor Haschek asked us in our interviews.
Well, I think we can follow the agenda, and obviously if we're on a topic such as communities of interest or release of the census data, if the commission has comments and wants to have discussion, that can certainly happen.
Okay.
Sounds good. I put a big X over number 2, a little bit more efficient that way, and we're on to item number 3, hoping we're going to be hearing from the public about matters under the jurisdiction of the commission, but are not part of this agenda.
And Chair, if I would also like to just mention for public comment that we have opened the meeting to live comments. So we have published the phone number, the Zoom number, and the link on our YouTube. So when members of the public are streaming right now watching YouTube, they can call in, and we will bring them into the meeting. And I just wanted to say that when members of the public are coming in, they'll be placed in the waiting room, and then we will just invite them to speak, and they also can raise their hands when they have questions. So just to state, if you're calling in on your telephone or your cell phone, you would hit *9 to raise your hand, so then we'll be able to call on you, and a *6 to mute, and *6 to unmute. So just technical updates. And I will turn it over to the clerk. And it looks like we have one member of the public on the line.
So Val, we're going to go ahead and let you in here in just a moment.
Yes, I just was interested in how this process all works. I live in the 5th district, and the 5th district is horrendous. It stretches from Mendocino down to the Sonoma County line, over to Highway 101, up 101 to Oak Knoll in Ukiah. Then it goes around the mountains and comes out at around where the high school is. It goes along the Low Gap, I guess, to where Highway 101 comes in, and it goes up to Willits to about Walker Road. So it's a very unwieldy district. And it is also a district that many people don't know that they are in that district. People are confused about who their supervisor is. And so, as somebody who works with Mendocino Political Women's Coalition, it's important to us for people to understand who their supervisor is. So when you get around to drawing those lines, see if you can make them a little bit more understandable to the general public. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. So is that the only person we have speaking for agenda item number 3?
Yes, currently that's the only person we have.
Okay. And is this agenda item number 3 something that any of the letters or that might have been sent in would be a time to mention them?
Yes, this would be, but we didn't have any come in.
Okay. Well, perfect. Let's move on to number 4 then. Staff updates. I think we're going to hear about input received from the public from Sherry.
Yes, thank you, Chair Farmer. As of tonight, we have not received any additional information, additional input since the last meeting, since the September 14th meeting.
Okay. And are there any changes on the deadline?
Through the chair, Charlotte Scott,
comment.
I can provide that update. At the last meeting, Ms. Cohen had asked me and asked us if there had been any changes, providing more time for your commission to work on the redistricting process in light of some recent press releases from the state redistricting committee. And I wanted to let you know I did look into it, and the California Redistricting Commission is the independent commission that is established to draw districts for, or draw assembly and state senate districts for the state. And they had petitioned the Supreme Court a couple of months ago to see about extending the deadlines for redistricting specific to their process. And I believe the Supreme Court responded, and I believe they decided that they would, if there was any extension, it was very small. They still have to have districts drawn or their boundaries drawn by the end of the year. So maybe it was a week or two, but there hasn't been any changes to the timeline, the very strict and shortened, condensed timeline that we have for drawing supervisorial districts. But I will keep monitoring that and provide updates if anything changes at future meetings.
Thank you, Charlotte. So here's where I think we get the star of the show. Leaf gets to tell us about the release of the census data.
Okay, Chairman, the census data was released on September 16th. Again, that's the Census Bureau making its Public Law 94-171 file available to the public. It comes in basically 4 tables. One table being race, population race, with Hispanic origin, Hispanic or Latino origin being a separate category. And then they've developed a table 2, a second table that incorporates those of Hispanic who identified themselves as Hispanic origin or Latino in with the other racial categories. So a lot of the data that I'm going to be showing you tonight is what they call table P2, which is the Hispanic origin and Latino origin intermixed into the racial groups. Generally in the census form, or what they have now is a census questionnaire online, those are 2 separate categories. In other words, they ask you your racial category, which as the Census Bureau defines it, is several core categories, and they're included in race. Hispanic or Latino origin is not included in that. It's a separate question, but they've worked on the tables to get them incorporated. I think that's a little easier to deal with than trying to always explain that, well, here's the racial categories and here's the Hispanic origin, but they're separate tables. So this makes it a little easier, and that's what I'll be showing you tonight. There's a couple other categories that split out the 18-year and above folks in both of those categories, both those tables. So you'll have table P3, I think, is the 18 years and above for the standard table with just race and Hispanic separated, and table, I believe, P4 is 18 years and above for that data that shows Hispanic Latino incorporated into as a racial category. So with that, I'm going to try to share my screen here. And I'm going to bring over a map. This is an interactive mapping tool. Does everyone see that? Okay. So what I've done is the heavier black outline is the current 2011 supervisorial districts. The lighter gray lines are the 2020 census blocks. From each census from one to the next, a lot of blocks do change shape. So sometimes these blocks are not the same shape as they were in 2010. The case in point, I'll zoom in here. This is a best fit of blocks to the current supervisorial district boundaries. And just to let you know, sometimes these blocks go way up into the hills or out and about. And previous census, there was a block split right here. This year, that block is not split. So when you grab it and try to do the best fit of a particular study area, then sometimes you get some odd shapes. But a lot of times what we'll do is we'll overlay an address point layer to see where the majority of the population lies within that block. And generally, when you get up here on the ridge line, you don't have too many people living there in this particular area here that I happen to know something about. Let me see if I can just identify that really quickly for you. So you can see how the new block looks as opposed to the 2010 block was split down here. So in most cases, you're not changing any population to the extent that it would change your figures of deviation to any great extent. I want to show you here on this particular interactive mapping application. As we move blocks around, we can see the changes here in both the population figures. And I want to draw your attention to total population. This percent deviation from the average. So this program already knows what the average is. It's calculated based on the 5 districts we've set up and the total population. So it's going to tell us what the deviation is currently from that 18,320 average figure. So as I mentioned in one of our earlier meetings, I thought that there would be 3 districts that would pretty much meet the criteria as they in their current configuration based on how much they grew or did not grow. And that is what exactly has happened. The 5th district, the 2nd district, and the 1st district, all down here, basically have they're less than 3% deviation from the average. So in a sense, and they don't split communities of interest, they don't split incorporated cities or census designated places. So they fit a lot of the criteria that you're looking for. The big change is in the lowest populated to the highest populated districts. The 4th district, including the city of Fort Bragg, actually lost population in the last 10 years. So their numbers are pretty low. The 3rd district actually gained quite a few people, even though they were the highest populated district back in 2010. They continue to grow, mostly in the Covelo Round Valley area. And they are now, District 3 is about 6.56% above the average. So that's quite a bit above 3%. And District 4 is 8.15% below the average. So that's quite a bit below the average. So if someone was looking to maintain this type of situation without changing too much, you would have to do something by reducing the size of the 3rd district and increasing the size of the 4th district to balance that population. There are a few things that can be done down here to adjust these numbers. The 5th district does have a little bit more. They're kind of close to that 3, and so there's room for adjustment. And the 2nd district is a little low, so there's a little bit of room for adjustment there. So there are some opportunities to improve this particular plan if that was so desired. And I just want to show you a little bit about this this tool. I've set up several blank examples of this tool where we can go in and select blocks and without the benefit of looking at the current districts. So if someone came up with a plan, say the public sent us in a plan, and we could use one of these tools to recreate their plan and see how well it balanced population and how it adhered to the rest of the criteria that we have to look at. So it's not to say that this is what you have to follow. It's just, this is the example we have right now. And it's good to know how far off or how not far off we are with the current plan. But I'm going to zoom in here to the second district. And you can see down here, the second district has 18,180. So it's a little low, but it's only 0.76% under the average. The fifth district has a few more people in it than it actually has to have, but it would be okay as it is. But if you wanted to take one of these blocks and put it into the city of Ukiah, this area particularly down here is, when you look at the aerial photograph, it's just continuous development from the city, even though it's outside the city boundary. Most folks here would consider they live in Ukiah. And you could say the same thing for up here in the northern part of the second district as well. These people here in the first district pretty much consider themselves Ukiahans. These people here in the first district, Norgard Lane and along South State Street, consider themselves Ukiahans in that community of interest. But the fifth district has quite a few people. So if you wanted to say, change this particular application can do that for us as we work through it. And we're going to say we're going to take area from the fifth district and assign it to the second district. And you can watch this table, how some of these figures will change. So I'm going to take that district. Actually, that little block has over 300 people in it. So there's quite a bit of folks. So it changed my boundary. That's the current. And now I've just changed the boundary there. So that little block is now in the second district. And we can look back here at the figures. So the fifth district, by taking out over 300 people, we've reduced that 2.5% down to about 0.8% difference. And we brought up the second district to about 0.99, or pretty darn close to the actual average. A little bit higher than it was. This one's a little bit lower. So we sort of balanced that out, and we probably improved our community of interest. So we've met a couple of the criteria. We've made it a little better than it was before. And you can see the effect of that. We can do that on a large scale by selecting a lot of blocks and changing them around, or by drawing whole new boundaries and then looking at how that balances the population for them. And we can see that real time as we move blocks around. So this is a tool that we can have at our meetings, public meetings, and use to explore some of the scenarios that we might come up with. I'm going to put that back the way it was. Okay, and so now it's back the way it was. This actual census data came, as I said, came out in September, around September 16th. The state was saying that they're going to have their data, adjusted data out supposedly 30 days after the census data comes out. The census data wasn't supposed to come out until the end of September, so the state was saying they weren't going to have their data until the end of October. So I'm hoping, because the Census Bureau was about 2 weeks early, that the state will be 2 weeks early, but I can't guarantee that, of course. But, you know, being positive, I'm hoping for that result. And Chairman, I'm open to any questions on the information I presented.
That is really cool. I wish we had a stadium full of people debating this together. I was actually curious if you could kind of give us an example, especially since we only had one comment from the public, if you could kind of address what Val had to say. Just sort of an example, if Val was still on the line, how we would be using her perspective to look at this map.
Yeah, it's based on the criteria. We don't have a lot of room to move around in the 5th district. You know, you can pick an area of the 5th district. For instance, she was talking about this area over here. Here's Pinoleville. Here's the Lovers Lane area that was going to be developed. This is Sierra Sunset residential neighborhoods. The high school is actually down here in the 2nd district, but the boundary comes up to the western edge of the high school. There may be enough population in the 5th district as it stands right now currently to take some of these blocks and say, put them in the 1st district. But you can't do too many of those because then the 1st district will have too much population. And then you're going to have to get rid of that population from the 1st district. There's also, one of the things I'm going to add to these is a base map so that you can see underlying information. But right up through here is Highway 101. So you have this area in here, a number of blocks that are east of Highway 101 that are probably more associated with the Redwood Valley community of interest. And there's an opportunity, if someone wanted to look at what the numbers would look like by bringing this boundary back to Highway 101 in this area so that the 5th district did not go east of Highway 101 in this particular area. You know, so there's some room to make some minor adjustments. What has happened historically is this 4th district has traditionally been one of the slower growing districts. And the line at times, I sent everyone, or at least I sent Sherry, a series of maps showing past supervisorial districts from 71, 81, 91, 2000, 2011. And you'll notice that the southern line has gone up and down on various occasions, depending on the population shifts. Right now, it's just above the town of Mendocino. So these blocks out here, they have little to no population. A lot of these blocks are 0 population blocks or have very little population. A lot of it's resource land, forest land. So your population is right along the coast, your higher density population. If you wanted to reduce the area of the 5th district, and increase the area and hence the population of the 4th district, you would consider moving this down. Well, I know from past experience that the folks in Mendocino consider themselves part of the 5th district, and Comshy is down here. They consider themselves part of the 5th district, and would probably have some comment about us putting them in the 4th district. But that's something that could be done. I think the comments, the way I noted them down, and this being the second set of public comments we got, we had another set, a letter for earlier on, but this is the second comment we had, and it wasn't too specific. I think it stood to the extent the extent of the 5th district is very large. It's the only one that goes from east to west from one boundary of the county to the next. And it is a large area. It includes many communities of interest to pick up enough population to balance that. Making any change to the 5th district is going to require you to do changes in the other districts as well. Given that they're bordered completely on one side by the Pacific Ocean and on another side by Sonoma County and Lake County, if you reduce area, then you've got to give that area to some other district. Okay, and then they're going to have too much population. So then you're going to have to give their area to some other district that already has too much population. So it does create kind of a set of dominoes. Not that you would, you could put in the work to try to balance that out, but there's no guarantee in the end that you're gonna be able to balance the population and still hit all the criteria. I guess that's part of the work that we need to look at. But frankly, making the 5th district smaller, I think you can make some small incremental changes, but at 18,320, you've got what, 470 people that you can move around with being right at the average, and maybe 500 to 600 people you could move around before getting too far out from the average, staying in that 3%. So there's a number of people and you can make some changes, but other than that, how to make a district more understandable to its, the people who live there. Today we have tools that you can go online and you can put in your assessor parcel number or your address, and you can zoom in and find out exactly what district you're in. So finding out, how do I know what district I'm in? Today we have some tools that help you do that, whereas we did not in the past, that are on the public internet. And how to make it the extent smaller, unless we had a completely different configuration, which may run afoul of what other people want in the 5th district, then you're going to be pretty hard pressed to make it much smaller than it is now, unless you come up with a completely different configuration. So I guess that's how I would address her concerns. And I think as we get more involved in the process, everyone will have a better understanding of what I'm trying to describe to you as we get into the nitty-gritty of working on these maps.
Thank you, Leif. I see that Dee, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Leif, if you could clarify for me, the colored lines on the map, those are the current census boundaries if we laid the census blocks over our current district maps, correct?
It's the best fit of blocks to those districts, yes.
Right, okay. And then the population totals, or is that based on our district boundaries or on the colored line boundaries?
Those are based on those colored line boundaries.
Okay.
Grouping
All
of
right.
blocks.
Okay, I have a lot more to say about this, but I don't think now's the time. So I'll just keep it to myself for now. But
you notice that, if I may, Chairman, the block boundaries we have, our district boundaries that we have on the map, in many cases look like straight lines. That's because always in the past, our process has been to use voter precincts as the building blocks of our district. And what we would do in the beginning, starting this process that we're working on now, and as we did in 2011, we did a best fit for voter precincts. And then we calculated the numbers for each voter precinct. We could move those around as you saw me moving blocks around today. However, it's sort of the consensus of our staff that the requirements are a little bit more stringent this time around. And the focus is more on, we really need to use the blocks themselves to as building units for our district boundaries. So that's where you'll see a little difference here.
Peter, please go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I have two questions. The first is, when we look at the data that LEAF has provided to us here, the question that comes to mind is there more than a 10% deviation between the largest district, which is the third, and the smallest district by population, which is the fourth?
Yes, there is.
Looks like there's a 12.6.
It's more like 14%. Yeah.
Yeah, 14, you're right.
Yeah, 14.7, is that it?
Sounds
So-
about right. I don't have the exact figure in front of me, but yeah.
So if we're just looking at population as a starting point, since it is the single most highest priority that we have to adhere to, how many people would have to be moved if we were just trying to equalize this within the 10% deviation between the fourth and the third district? Can you give me a number of how many people that would be? If
I'm
we
sorry,
were
at the top of my head, I cannot. With the one caveat that you probably wouldn't want to be too close to that 10%. Again, as
well, granted, I'll grant that, but I'm just trying to sort of look at a baseline where you're technically within the 10%, which is, I mean, the standard that has been presented to us is 10%. Granted, we would want to do better than that. But what I want to know is, it seems that just based on what we've presented so far, that we're 14.7% deviation. And I suppose I could do the numbers kind of 14%, the deviation between the third and the fourth is, oh, I've moved that map now that you have, it's, well, okay, so the third and the fourth, there's 19,005 change in the third, and there's 16.8 in the fourth. So if I just subtract, I get 3.7% difference, or excuse me, I get 3,700 approximately. Am I looking at that right? No, 2,700. The older I get, the worse my math gets. So 2,700 is the difference that represents 14.7% deviation. So make it 15, and 15 into 2.7 goes about 200 people per percent. So to reduce it, and this is ballparking, but to reduce it, you'd have to move about 800 people, maybe 1,000 people to get to an acceptable level. In other words, you'd have to move 1,000 people out of the 3rd district into the 4th district to get you under that 10% marker. Does that sound kind of within the ballpark?
It does.
Okay.
You know, we can examine some of that.
And so then the next question I have is, and I got a sense that we're going to have to work on that nut. Maybe I'm jumping the gun, but I think that's a nut that has to be figured out. No matter how many alternative maps we might put together, we're still going to basically come back to those two districts being the ones that have to be adjusted the most. And so the next question I have is, right now, the public and the commission doesn't have access to this mapping tool that you have presented to us tonight, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So when in this process are we going to have this mapping tool or an equivalent mapping tool posted on the GIS system that we can actually start moving the basic tracts from one district to another, and then seeing what impact that has on the population of the 2 districts. And also, we need to, I think, see at least some significant data in terms of how it impacts racial minorities and communities of interest and jurisdictional boundaries. And are we going to be able, at what point do you envision having that tool available to the public and to us to start redrawing lines in a way so that we have some meaningful data to determine how alternative maps might satisfy our criteria for redistricting? I apologize for the length of that question and its complexity, but I'm sort of where I'm at in this process is, in terms of time, are we looking at October 20th when we would have that kind of a mapping tool available to us to start actually changing some boundary lines and being able to see what those impacts are in terms of population, racial minorities, and jurisdictional boundaries? Or are we talking later than that?
I don't have the capability of putting this particular application on our GIS portal. I have added the block boundaries with population data onto the redistricting map on the public GIS portal. And you can take a look at the population figures for the district and the blocks. You can move or select groups of them and see what the population is and add and subtract to those to get an idea of what your changes, what effect your changes are going to have on the population figures. But that's pretty much the tool I have available. Another alternative would be to produce paper maps with spreadsheets with the data, identifying the blocks where people can draw on the maps and then calculate the data by hand, which is something that other counties are also offering. there was or is a tool that's similar to this, but not quite the same, called District R. And we had, I've approached them several times, tried to contact them. There's a couple of counties around us who have applications that District R has developed applications for them. And they have that tool on their website. They have not responded to us, so it's kind of difficult for me to get them to add our county to that list if they're not going to respond to me. So we ran into a roadblock on that.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, Paul.
Well, I'm just trying to answer
intent.
your question as you mentioned it,
You're
and
doing
trying
a
to
good
give
job.
you an idea of the tools that we have available. So, but to answer your question as simply as possible is I don't have the capability of putting this particular tool, because it works on different software, onto the public site. I can make improvements to the map we have there, and hopefully people can use that to draw some boundaries and then calculate statistics for those boundaries.
Okay, that's at least enlightening from the standpoint. It's cumbersome, but what I hear you saying, and is clearing up in my head, is that if I want to propose an alternative map right now using the GIS mapping system that's available to the public, I could go in and I could identify census tracts in a district, some census tracts in District 3 that are contiguous or close to, or could be contiguous if they were brought in to District 4. And then I could get, looking at those census tracts based on what's available in our system right now, I could get the numbers in terms of the population in that census tract. Would I be able to get racial minority information in I assume this is in the pop-ups?
And yes, you can. If you want,
Okay.
I can show you that right now.
Well, before we go there, I just want to get this clear in my head. So I could do that. Right now, I could go in and I could start identifying census tracts. And when I got a list of census tracts with, let's say I'm shooting to move 2,000 people from District 3 into District 4, when I got to that place, I could then identify those census tracts and refer it back to the commission as a proposed map for adjusting the lines between 3 or 4. Anybody on the public could do that. Is that right?
Yes, you could do that.
Okay. And that's basically all that we can offer them in terms of automated access to data at this point. And it doesn't look like we're going to have anything more sophisticated than
Correct.
that. I mean, I'd be happy if it did happen, but it doesn't look like we're going to get anything more sophisticated than that in the foreseeable future. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that this is a real challenge, but I think because the reason I pose these questions is I'm getting questions from the public about when can they draw maps. And I think I can say to them now that the data that's in the GIS system is not the final data because it's still going to be adjusted for the prison inmate population, but it's pretty close. And if you wanted to start going through census tract by census tract and compiling a set of census tracts that you want to move from one district to another, you would be able to do that and then submit it to the commission as a proposal for redrawing the lines. Is that correct?
That's correct, except for the fact that the unit you're moving around would be blocks as opposed to census tracts, but otherwise you're correct.
Blocks. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate for that clarification. We get down to the block data.
Okay. If I may add, Peter, in the past, the process, in a public meeting is that the commission would have come up with several versions of the boundaries based on public comment, and that we would present those to the at the public meeting, and then that gives people sort of a goalpost on how to comment on one version of or one scenario of district boundaries as opposed to another. And I know we're not that far down the process, but it does become clear, especially to the public, how to comment once they have that goalpost, when something's presented to them.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see you've had
I'm
your
gonna
hand
warm my
raised for a
hands
while.
now.
Yeah, it's a little bit of an overlap with what Peter was saying, but it feels like, and Leaf, tell me if I'm wrong, that historically it's the boundaries have been coming from a political standpoint. If you're using voting precincts and things like that to help determine boundaries. And I think it's really important for us to look at more socioeconomic interests in the county. And District 5 is a perfect example of that, where there's complete different sections of a district that have completely different needs and different influences and all that, and yet the same supervisor is being asked to represent everybody. So I think it's really important that we do that, but I think it's going to be, my difficulty is in the short time that we have, how do we know if that's even feasible? I would like to make I have a map in my head that I've been working on where I take, I'm not even thinking about population, but I'm thinking about communities of interest and watersheds and community needs and things like that. But I don't have any idea if the population piece is going to work that way. Is there a way that I can, other than I guess what Peter we just learned with what Peter's questions is, I could go in and do it manually and do all the math, but is there any way that we can work with Leaf or to create these maps to see if changing the outlook and approaching from a different perspective would actually work? Is it even feasible? Or should I submit a public comment? I mean, and submit a map that I think is suggested that we should look at. And I just want to know the best way to do that. I don't even know if that made any sense, but let me know if you don't know what I'm asking.
Chairman Farmer, if I may, I understand what you're saying. In the past, it's happened in several different ways. The commissioners would develop a map or describe the boundaries, and then we as staff would try to map out those boundaries as best as possible, and then determine the population counts for you. And many times we did that during the public meeting. That was part of the mapping process. We could put up different layers. You can show us, different ideas of where those boundaries should be. We can interactively use this tool to move areas, blocks to approximate those boundaries and take a look at what those numbers are going to look like. But just to clarify, the use of voting districts was not a political. We did those as a practical aspect. We were actually using blocks, but we used block statistics and blocks to approximate voting districts so that when we were through, there wouldn't have to be a massive redrawing of voter precincts. But it did not have anything to do with the political aspects of the voter precincts. They were just used as geographical building blocks to alleviate work later on about changing precinct boundaries or redrafting supervisorial district boundary descriptions. So there was a practical aspect to it, but in essence, we were moving blocks. We were moving blocks that were grouped into voter precincts.
Okay. I understand the difference. Thanks for clarifying that.
Charlotte, I see you wanted to contribute something.
Thank you, through the chair. I To respond to Dee's very good question, I wanted to say that the commissioners can certainly provide their own public comment, and that would be a mechanism where you could share, for example, like you said, your proposal of a draft map or of how you would see certain communities of interest, and then that's one way. And then also, as Leaf said, when we're at the map drawing stage, it could also be something that the commission chooses to ask Leaf to do during public meeting as well. So those are two ways that you could do that for sure.
I just have one addition to this. Is there a better way? I mean, do we as a group have a preference for how should we put it in as public comment and then have Leaf bring it to the next meeting maybe? Or what do we want to, how do we want to work this? What would be the most efficient way for us to do this?
Paula, did you have an answer to that?
A question. I have another question.
Well, let's talk about Dee's question then for a second.
Yes.
You know, Dee, I think we're a little bit. I use the metaphor of jogging by a stoplight, waiting to run. Still, I feel like what we need most of all is some public comment that will probably agree with some of our own opinions, and then it can become larger than the commission. Clearly, if that doesn't start to happen, we need to just start moving on it. I don't know if we're there yet, but I also think that the public will probably perhaps be more engaged once they start perhaps hearing about some of the possibilities that you might see. So personally, I think that, you know, clearly you have a vision that you're excited about and passionate about, and I would like to hear more about that. It seems like that might be for next meeting, and hopefully we're going to have some more public comments as well. I would also like to hear, after Paula's question, before Leaf, you get rid of that map, maybe just a little bit more about some of those other borders, so that we can all have some ideas about if we do begin some sort of domino effect. You know, what does that first third border look like? How sort of solidified in a community of interest in that is that? Paula, do you want to ask your question first, or could Leaf maybe just say a little bit more about some of those other border
Dylan, real quick,
town regions?
member of the community is waiting to speak.
We do?
We do.
Okay.
So if we squeeze them in, perfect.
Okay.
Juan, we're going to go ahead and let you talk now. In just a moment. And then Juan, you're going to unmute with *6.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Oh, thank you. This is Juan Orozco, the mayor of the city of Ukiah. And there were a couple of things that Leif, you mentioned about, including my interest is the population, of course, of the city of Ukiah and District 2. But I don't know whether there is a way to find out how many people were missing in the census. I know that typically people that are undocumented don't fill out or didn't fill out the census forms. And that would be the case of people in the south end of the District 2. And I'm just wondering about the accuracy and whether there's a way to tell, you know, or, you know, I'm that probably, are those the actual numbers and the census, or did they kind of, you know, figured out by like how many people were missing? how many people didn't fill out their census forms. You know, we talk about blocks in the north end of District 2. Most people, I feel like in those neighborhoods did complete their census forms. So I just wonder if there's a way to get those numbers more accurate.
Chairman Farmer, to answer that question, the easiest way is not really. On the plus side, both the county of Mendocino for the unincorporated area and the city of Ukiah within the city boundaries participated early on in what's called the LUCA program, where local agencies get a chance to see the address lists that are going to be used to contact people in the census. And we're offered the opportunity within a time period to, based on their criteria, find addresses they don't have. So the projections and the surveys that were coming out were telling us that Mendocino County was going to have less population than we did in 2010. However, when you look at the number of households, the addresses that we found in the county and that city staff found in the city of Ukiah, especially, you know, we helped them out with data as well for mobile home parks. And I think that has a lot to do with the actual numbers showing that we did not lose population in Mendocino County. We did not grow by that much, but both the city of Ukiah and the county as a whole have higher numbers than what was being projected. And I think a lot of that has to do with the work, one of the participating in that process, but also in the cities and counties did a complete count committee to try to get the word out to people to actually participate in the census. And without those two programs, I think we'd be sitting here with a loss of population countywide. One of the cities that did not participate in the LUCA program was City of Fort Bragg. And, you know, they're showing less population than they had in 2010. And it might have been different if they also would have participated within the city in the LUCA program to find addresses that weren't on the list of the Census Bureau. So in other words, if you're not on the Census Bureau's address list, you don't get sent a form or the opportunity to, because, you know, they want to count people who at their permanent place of residence. As far as the numbers go, if you look at the trends over the last 30, 40 years, our population growth rate has been declining to more of a static. And based on trends, I think a slight growth rate that they're showing for the 2020 census is probably reasonably accurate. I'm never going to say it's 100% accurate or even near that, but you know, it's a monumental task counting everyone in the country every 10 years. And, you know, a couple of years after the census, work already starts on the next one. So there's a lot of effort put into it. It is dependent on people answering those forms. And there are methodologies when you do not answer them from an address. They actually do send people back out to try to gather the information from addresses they know are there, but did not get a response back from. And sometimes they are able to contact the people directly. If they can't, then they even try to get information from, say, the neighbors. Gee, how many people live there? You know, do they live there more than 6 months out of the year? You know, et cetera. They really do try to do a good job of counting everyone. You know, that being said, there's a lot of areas in the county that are kind of inaccessible and hard to get to if you have to go back out in the field and count people. So I think the accuracy is what we have. It's what we have to work with. It's what we'll have to work with for the next 10 years. But at least we're not showing a loss of population as they were projecting.
Paula, you want to go ahead? Mary, I see your hand up too.
Yes, I would. Okay. I would like to address, first of all, the first question about the accuracy of the census. Our complete count committee went to extraordinary measures to find people and get them counted. We went to food banks, we went to schools, we went any place where there would be a group of people. So even if they didn't receive a form at home, we were able to help them via computer or a telephone to answer the questions and get their addresses in there and counted. You know, it was a very, very arduous journey, and lots of people really put out to help with that. So that kind of answers part of that question. Would I like to see more people participate? Yes. We had some really very people who just did not want to participate for a variety of reasons. So then now to my question. My question, and I think I've asked this before, but don't remember the answer. Do we have any kind of idea of our incarcerated population? I would think that maybe law enforcement, parole, one of the county departments might, or the courts, know of, you know, kind of a ballpark. Are we talking thousands of people that are going to be added back in? Do we think we're talking hundreds of people? Just to kind of give us some idea of what we're going to be facing, hopefully in just the next couple of weeks. And that's probably a Charlotte question.
Charlotte, did you want to answer?
Through the chair, thank you for that question, Paula. That is a very good question. I don't have the answer for you, but with direction from the board, I can do a little bit of research to see if there is a mechanism to find out a kind of a ballpark, at least, for how these numbers might be affected in a couple of weeks, hopefully sooner, when the state adjusts that state prison population and might add people to our county numbers. So I will put that on the list, and we can add that for staff updates for next week, and I'll let you know when I can find out.
That would be great. Thank you.
Mary, you've been patient.
We want to encourage the public, if we can give them what's changing. Say, let me tell you about the changes we have seen in the districts, that there's a large variation between District 4 and District 3. And we may have to make some changes in boundary lines. Once you put that out, that there may be changes, and what that it's based on what we really got in the census, you may always appreciate the comments, but you may get them.
I think you're right.
So somehow we need to report back to the public after every meeting, but to pick out, I mean, if you just put the notes, everybody would go to sleep. But if you pick out things like, do you know we have this big difference we're going to have to deal with? I think putting that out just might help us.
And we will definitely be getting into that on item number 4 as well, as we talk more about community outreach. And Mr. Orozco, if you are still online, I'm really hoping you're going to comment on that public outreach side, because it sounds like you might be able to help us with that. But do we have any more? Oh, Leaf, could you just briefly, we just go through these borders a little bit more? I mean, I don't know how, I know you know so much. You could save us a lot of time of relearning things to just kind of go through some of these borders real quick.
Well, do you have some specific areas you would like to take a look at, or questions on,
Yeah, like
on the
D1, D3? What kind of has oriented those communities of interest?
again, you're getting up into Mendocino National Forest here. You don't have a lot of people in this particular area. However, we're looking at the Van Arsdale, Potter Valley project here. Folks, would consider that part of the Potter Valley community of interest. To get enough population, we also have the Redwood Valley area in that same district. There are parts of Redwood Valley that, or at least extensions of that are kind of in the 5th district. There's also, and there always has been, parts of the city of Ukiah in the 1st district. If you look at the historic maps, you have to look at historic district maps with a grain of salt, in that there's different criteria from one census to the next, especially in the earlier redistricting efforts. Also, Mendocino County did not have modern census geography until the 1990 census. So when you look at those boundaries from 71 and 81, all they had to work with was geography they called enumeration districts. We did not have tracts, block groups, and blocks until the 1990 census. So the geography changes over time, the criteria changes over time. But if you look at some of those historic boundaries, you'll notice that at different times, the city of Ukiah was split between the 2nd and the 1st district. That would kind of go against the criteria we have today. But, and it hasn't been that way for over 30 years, but the 1st district has always included some neighborhoods where you would probably consider, Ukiah area. Regina Heights, which is this area right in here. You have El Dorado and Deerwood. And then, of course, Talmadge. But any one of these areas might think of themselves as their own community of interest, which is fine but there's no one single population. Like Talmadge does not have enough population to be its own district. So again, it's grouped with multiple communities of interest. And the reason this map has sort of taken the shape that it has, with the boundaries that it has, fluctuating slightly over the years, is that there's really only one community of interest in and by itself that has enough population to be a district based on that average population. And that's the city of Ukiah. There's no reason that the city of Willits or the city of Fort Bragg could be their own a community of interest, other than the fact that we don't have the population there. So when we group these areas of communities of interest together to make up the population, then you're going to get the kind of boundaries that you have. Does that mean that there's not opportunities to fine tune that? There are opportunities to fine tune that. If we go down here, Hopland, in the past, people in Hopland have made reference to the fact that, gee, we really don't want to be in the 5th district because we're more aligned with the eastern half of the county, with communities of interest in the eastern half. And that's probably true. But if you took all the people down in the Hopland area and you stuck them in the 1st district, then you're going to have too many people in the 1st district. And then you're going to have to add that to somebody else. So do you add it to the 5th district? I mean, you made the 5th district smaller here by getting rid of Hopland, but then you're just going to have to turn around and maybe give it a huge part of Redwood Valley. So, or you're going to have to take a large part of the northern part of Redwood Valley and Potter Valley and put it into this district. But what do you do there? Then you're making a tough situation worse. So, there are opportunities along some of these boundaries to fine tune it. Again, if you don't want to do too many changes. If you want to do a lot of changes, then, we start from a blank page and, take a look at how those districts are going to look and start drawing lines.
What about 3 and 5? And then I'll send it over to you again.
Well, 3 and 5 is interesting. This area right in here, we zoom in a little bit. As the public comment referred to, it does go up to Williams Ranch and the Muir Wood Road, which is going to be not too far from the city of Willits right here. And that was because during the last census, the 5th district did not grow to any great extent. And we had to find areas to add to the 5th district. And so areas around Ukiah, little tiny areas were added to the 5th district, and then this area here. In an earlier redistricting plan, this area you see right here with these blocks, that was part of the 4th district at one time as well. So this area here is sort of changed back and forth. It was part of the 3rd district, and it was part of the 4th district. Now it's part of the 5th district. And again, because you're along the boundary, you know, that's where things change when you have to adjust for population. But let's take a look at more in depth here a little bit. You know, you've got 6 people in this block. It's a pretty good sized block, but there's not that many people. This block here, we have 0 population. 0 population. Here we got another 6 people. Up in here, you're starting to get 5 people, you know, 81 people here in this block. So you tend to, in the more rural areas, have to take in a larger area to have any chunk of population that you're going to move from one district to the next, or to include in a district or another. And hence, when you're trying to fine tune something, it's always usually around the urban areas where you have smaller blocks, where you have have more population.
Hopefully we don't have any aspiring trespass growers on the line learning about zero population. Dee, you have what did you want to say?
I just have one question. Leif, do you know how close is the District 2 boundary to the actual city of Ukiah boundary?
Let's take a look at that. Just give me a second. I'm going to open up a new map here. Since I already have that on this map. This is the public GIS portal map for redistricting. And I'll turn on the yellow boundary there is the city boundary, but I'll turn on the census designated place. You can see this red area here with these 2 outliers surrounded in yellow. That's the city boundary. So you have some areas that are not in the city, such as part of this subdivision up here, what they call the Brush Street Triangle here. You have some area up on the Doolin Canyon, and then Laws Avenue, a little bit of area down in here. Again, not a lot of population up in here, but you're going to get some high density in Tedford, Fall Avenue, you know, Laws Avenue, Canyon Drive area. As I was showing you earlier, this one little block here has over 300 people in it. So you can get a lot of population density in these smaller blocks around the urban area. But that's the difference between the 2nd district as its current configuration and the city limit.
Okay, thank you.
So do we have any more comments on this item number 4? I think it's important that we talk a little bit more about getting some more public comments.
Farmer, this is Dylan. It looks like Juan has something else to say.
Okay.
Juan, you can go ahead and unmute yourself when you're ready. *6.
Thank you. Thank you. I apologize. I was traveling earlier and went from one signal to another signal. So I know, Leif, when you began to talk, you proposed a couple of ideas in regards to adding blocks to the District 2 area, and that the north and the south end of the district. And historically, the people in these areas do definitely feel that they're part of the city of Ukiah or the District 2, and do their business there as well. So I feel like naturally they should be added to District 2, and they don't necessarily will be part of the city limits, because those are a little bit different than the district boundaries. But if we're looking to adjust numbers, it would make sense to add those 2 areas. I know my question earlier and doubts about the accuracy of numbers, not necessarily because I don't doubt or that I have a problem with the numbers. It's just I wanted to see, because we know that there are people who did not fill out the census form, if there was a way to find out. But thank you for the details and the explanation on how we projected those numbers, and without having to count all the census forms.
On. Okay, so I don't think we have to vote on anything. We can move on to item number 4. And so this is my ad hoc. Somebody.
He's on 5, yeah.
So Paula and I had a meeting on the phone, and we talked about some of the things that we had already talked about in terms of making sure that we had a full media list. I also, based on that meeting, reached out to the Historical Society. Peter, do you want to say something? You are muted, Peter.
No, please continue. When you're finished, I have a thought.
Okay. I also reached out to the Max, and that did lead to the obvious realization that Gualala probably is going to stay in the 5th district, but still got to get as many people writing in as possible. We did agree that we need to be reaching out to the radio stations. Paula wrote an excellent letter, and she can get us up to date on what she's done with that letter. You want to talk about your letter, Paula?
Unmute. There we go. I had written a letter to the editor, which Kyle very nicely kind of helped make it a little more cogent. I did send it out, and I have not seen it in the newspaper, because we get a weekly newspaper. So today's would have been our newspaper on the coast. And if I don't see it today, I will call and kind of try to follow up. I think we had, following up on Kyle's comments, I have also reached out to radio station down on the coast. Mostly I've been reaching out to the people who helped us when we were doing the census count, because that's the easy one. I did pick up today the flyers that Sherry had worked on and have started posting those at post office box on my way back from Ukiah. And we'll start getting some of those out. And had we shared the the minutes from that meeting, Kyle? Do you know, they kind of talked about trying to do social media. We know what the county is doing. The county has hired and has somebody working now who is bilingual and is going to be doing more translation. So that will be good, that we can make sure that we get our word out to the non-English speaking population. Let's see. I think that's kind of the roundup of where we are. I had also reached out to the Max on the 4th and 5th district. Haven't heard anything back from them, and have been sending out emails. I did do a presentation last night, which Peter participated in, with the League of Women Voters to talk. Basically, I went through Charlotte's PowerPoint, not as well as Charlotte could do, but and then Leaf did a presentation, a little explanation of the mapper, and that generated a lot of interest and a lot of enthusiasm. So with the League of Women Voters behind and starting to get out to their groups, I think that was one of the things that we wanted to do, was have some groups kind of help spread the word around. So that was it. Thank you, Leaf. That was obviously well received. And I think answered a lot of questions, and we'll probably get more back from a lot of those people who are looking at it. So any comments? Peter, any comments after the presentation last night? Excuse me? I didn't hear that.
All right. Zoom turns you into an interrupter. Did you get my translation for your letter? I don't know.
Yes,
Okay.
I did. So, and get that out to some groups too. The Beacon our advocate used to do a Spanish version of letters and things, and they haven't been doing that recently. So I'm going to ask again if they would make sure that they get that one into an upcoming edition.
Peter, please go ahead.
Well, I think I just want to comment on, I think somebody else mentioned this earlier. I think the public is somewhat befuddled, because that's the comments I'm getting when I talk to people about this, about how they actually can provide meaningful input or make meaningful recommendations for how the lines of the districts ought to be redrawn. And that was one of the reasons why I posed the questions that I did to Leaf earlier, and I appreciate his thoughts, because now I think I have an answer. I'm going to tell people, you know, go to the GIS mapping tool that's available to the public, and look at that map and draw your own lines, and then add and subtract the population and data figures from the census blocks that you're moving from one district to another. And you can then at that point start to generate, at least conceptually, the maps that you think ought to be used by the county in the future, and submit them at that point to this commission to start thinking about and reviewing and assessing in terms of the criteria. The second thing that I think it'd be really useful to get out to the public is the map that was recently sent out, that Leaf generated, I believe, that shows the 2020 population of 91,801, and then the district breakdown and the average. I think what the public may have a question mark in their mind about is simply how far out of range are the existing districts, and And they're going to see, like I did when I looked at this immediately, that the third and the fourth district are the two that are at polar extremes, and they're also adjacent to each other. So I think it's going to generate a lot more focus for people who are thinking about how the lines ought to be readjusted in order to get the population more equitably distributed among the 5 supervisorial districts. And so as soon as we can, I'm getting to a suggestion here. I apologize for the length of time it's taking me to do it. But my suggestion is, as soon as we get this adjustment from the prison population, that we publish a similar map showing the disparities between the existing districts and the population totals, and widely distribute that through the media to the public so that they have a sense of which districts obviously have to change. And it's not to say that all the districts couldn't change, they certainly could, but we know 2 districts are going to have to change significantly in order to just get us to a place where we satisfy the legal requirements. And I think that's going to help the public in terms of conceptualizing what kinds of changes they want to submit to this commission. So that would be my recommendation. And I appreciate you giving me the time to say that. I'll lower my hand.
I think we lost the chair. I'm just noticing that.
Yeah, I do. We'll watch for him. I do
Nothing
see.
like one of my rants to chase people away. That's all I can say.
We'll let Vice Chair take over.
Oh, no. I said
Paula, you're it.
the
You're it.
broadband, I know, the broadband changes can't come fast enough. I've spent the whole evening with black lines going through my screen, so I've only seen half of it. All right, are there any other questions or comments or suggestions? If anybody wants to either contact their local, radio stations or their outlets, please let us know. Otherwise, I'm gonna start going down some of the lists that I have that Sherry has presented to try to generate some information or for some excitement. Oh, and he's back.
Vice Chair Mary, Commissioner
There too again.
So does Charlotte, yeah.
Okay, is Kyle back? All right.
I don't have Kyle, but I've got 2
and
Paulas
any other-
on my screen.
Oh, you do? I have a Kyle. He looks like he's ready to go backpacking in that picture. So anyway, yes, that's the getting out there and getting people excited about it. I think, Peter, that's a great idea to kind of put the maps out there once we get the adjusted population, to show people and see who's going to have some real interest in seeing what's going on, or any ideas of where they don't want to be. My one concern is that if people are drawing a whole lot of different maps, we got to make sure that they understand the constraints of the rules and regulations of which we're under, and not just think that just because they draw a map that it's going to be a fait accompli. So, hi, Kyle. Nice to see you. Want to take over?
Let's just redo our district boundaries based on internet speeds.
Oh, we'll compete. I did the speed test already for the county. Let's just hope that federal funding and the state funding comes through to help us out. Okay. Any other questions or suggestions of other ways for us to do some outreach? And Kyle, you take it from here.
Charlotte, I see that you have a comment.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on Peter's comment and wise suggestion for how to respond to the public when they, ask, how do I do the mapping? One thing was you mentioned, telling the public to go to the GIS mapping tool and draw the map of their communities of interest and their own lines and add and subtract figures. The other option is to draw the map and submit it to the redistricting website and allow staff to do some of that with their the mapping tool that they have. So that, and the other comment or question that I wanted to make was I understand the interest in wanting to have the public be able to do a precise map that takes into account all of the criteria. That is something they can do, or if to the extent possible, but it really is the commission and the board that must address the criteria. And what we're trying to do is get the input from the public really as to their communities of interest. And so it doesn't have, I would just caution not to limit and suggest to the public, oh, it's not meaningful unless it matches all of the criteria, because that's really one of the criteria is communities of interest, a very big criteria. The other factors are pieces that as the commission, you can analyze each of the maps that you receive within that criteria. And that, I just wanted to add that response. Thank you.
Sherry?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to also just give an update on some of the other outreach that we've also been doing. So we have our local, all the library branches have received the flyers and have posted the flyers in their locations in English and in Spanish. And they've also posted on their website as one of their banners about redistricting and put a link to our redistricting site. And then we have also reached out to the radio stations, and we will be starting PSAs on Monday. So we'll be running them twice a day. And then we have about a 60-second write-up for the paper or the radio stations. And then, as you know, we also send out over 900 emails to the public and a variety of community groups, and also to all the papers. And I have seen that the papers have been putting our meetings in their newspapers. And we also run on social media and the Facebook too. And so that's what I just wanted to give the commission an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Mary, I see that you have your hand up.
Hi. I agree with Charlotte. If you make things too complicated for people when it comes to drawing their own map, I don't think they're going to be moving parcel parts and looking at numbers. I think if you can tell them to draw the best they can of their idea and why they have the map they do, and then let staff do the numbers. At the same time, if you're going to put out with criteria, map will then be reviewed by the commission for meeting all the state and federal criteria. Because you don't want to make it too hard, because then a lot of people are not going to participate or try and give you any kind of map because you're putting up boundaries. Finally, my second part is, I was wondering if we reached out to health districts and rural health care clinics, because they impact a lot on healthcare and interact with the local communities, who they refer to, who they send to, their advocacy with their patients. I think it's really important that they perhaps want to have a voice in this, or at least ask. The other thing that occurred to me is reaching out to senior citizens, centers, because those people often are very active, very informed, and reaching out to them, at least with flyers and maybe an email to each center, because again, this may be eliciting things from a population that tends in the past historically to participate. Thank you.
Chair Farmer, we have a public comment from Juan again, when you're ready.
Oh, good. Go ahead, Juan.
Thank you. And sorry to keep asking questions here, but there's very little participation from the public, obviously. But I wanted to just give you a couple of ideas and suggestions in terms of community outreach to the Latino or to non-English speakers. I'm a co-chair of a Latino organization here in Ukiah, and we have direct contact with other Latino organizations in the whole county. So if you send us information, send us information to UVA, Ukiah Vecinos en Acción, and we can disseminate information to the other organizations in that county. And we also have a newspaper, a Spanish newspaper, that that information can be also shared and put out to the public through that newspaper and of course the social media outlets that those organizations have. UVA has social media outreach, and Periódico Al Punto also has a large number of people, non-English speakers. So if you put us on your mailing list and send us information, then we can help out that way. We can also translate any notices to the public, or so.
En Punto was the periódico.
Al Punto.
Al Punto.
Yeah, AL, one word, and then Punto. And the other one is,
in terms of the flyers, any place you'd recommend we put those flyers?
well, typically we put those flyers in laundromats for a lot of the non-English speakers in laundromats. And I know the Al Punto paper comes out monthly. To put an insert in the paper would be great as well. It gets distributed in the whole county, and some of it goes to Sonoma County, but the whole county of Mendocino gets this paper. Maybe a flyer could be an insert in the paper.
Carrie, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Mr. Orozco, this is Sherry Johnson. Would you send an email to redistricting@mendocinocounty.org, and I'll respond to you tomorrow with your contact information. I would love to outreach to you to get more information.
I certainly will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paula?
I did have a question. Is there any kind of budget for doing some advertising? I don't know whether it would cost to do anything in La Punta, but I just would like to know if there is some kind of budget for us.
Through the chair, this is Sherry Johnson. But we do have some funds for advertising, so we can always research the amount.
Thank you.
Mary?
Sorry, it went back up again. I was thinking that laundromats are a great place for flyers for that particular community. The other place is the markets that cater to the Mexican population. We have several, even right in Ukiah, and I'm sure most communities do, that is Spanish speaking, has their type of food for sale, so forth. And I think that'd be a good place also to put flyers, but I think Juan's suggestions are outstanding.
And one, you probably know, but there is the opportunity if anybody makes the request, I think, to have these meetings translated. Am I right, Sherry?
Yes, you're correct.
Oh, good. Yeah, we'll then make sure that we tell that to people that they can make comments in Spanish and participate in Spanish if they like.
And then if any, whether it's UVA or any other organizations also want a similar presentation to what Paula and Peter and Leaf did, we could arrange that as well.
Oh, that would be wonderful. UVA has a meeting and we're working on the agenda tomorrow, but we have a meeting the first Monday of the month. So this Monday we have a meeting at 5:30. I know it's maybe too late for you to organize something and present, but if you like, if you want to be on an agenda, I can put you on the agenda tomorrow.
Through the chair, Mr. Orozco, yes, please contact me tomorrow and we can see what we can work out.
Great. Yes.
Well, Juan, I think you made this little section so much more productive.
Well, my pleasure. I would like to help out as much as I can.
Yes.
So other than, do we have any other public comment on this item?
To the chair, this is Dylan. It does not look like it.
So we can move on to number 6 and just kind of review the meetings that we have set up and look at adding any additional ones. We have the October 7th public outreach workshop, the October 20th public outreach workshop. The 26th will be reporting to the Board of Supervisors. Then on the November 3rd, we'll have another public outreach workshop where we'll be planning on narrowing down to 3 to 4 maps. On the 9th, there'll be a redistricting hearing. We'll be presenting those maps to the Board of Supervisors. On the 18th, there'll be a special Board of Supervisors redistricting hearing to approve the maps. On the December 7th, the Board of Supervisors will have a hearing to introduce the ordinance. And on December 14th, which will be the regular supervisors meeting, there'll be a reading of the ordinance. Dee, do you have something to say?
Yes. Clarification, the meeting from the 9th, November 9th to December 14th are all Board of Supervisors meetings with no other public meetings. So do we have until November 9th to get our work done, or can we, I'm not sure. Are we done at that point? And then it's just about presenting to the Board of Supervisors? Or can we schedule more meetings in between those? And if we were only to get one, I would think we would need one between November 9th and November 18th, between the time we submit the draft maps and then the final maps.
If I may respond through the chair. So the November 9th is the meeting where your commission will present, 3 to 4 draft maps that you've narrowed things down to, and the board will provide input on, we anticipate an input on their preferred and vote on their preferred final map. And the difficulty with the timing here is that at the hearing where they approve final maps, I believe there needs to, those final maps need to have been published at least, I believe it may be 7 days before that hearing. I'll at the next meeting, I'll provide you more clarity on this timeline and how it, and I have that on another slide, but I don't see it here, but just that factors in the timelines of publishing the maps before the board votes. So because of how the timing for publishing maps and then voting on an ordinance and a second reading of an ordinance and having the deadline of the 15th of December, we do have very little wiggle room at the end there for making changes or having more outreach, because at this point we're really trying to narrow it down to the final maps, the final map that will be voted on. So there may be room to adjust this. I don't know if we're at a point where we know yet. We certainly have time if there is wiggle room in there to add a meeting, in the next couple of meetings when we get a better idea and we see when the state adjusted data comes out. But most of the outreach from the public will be in these next few meetings. And we do want to start to narrow it down to a few maps for the board in November.
So there, in all likelihood, our work will be done by the November 9th meeting then.
To respond, that is the way it looks right now, but that doesn't mean that this is necessarily rigid. I'll take a look at the timelines for publishing and notice requirements when we're at that stage. We do at all of these hearings, these last few hearings, the commission can and should certainly be present. And at all these hearings, public comment during the board meetings can still be made. They're still public meetings. They're just not the meetings without the Board of Supervisors. They're the same opportunities for the public and are available at the supervisors' hearings when those maps are discussed and narrowed down.
Do we have any obligation, any work that we need to do between when the draft maps are presented to the board and when the approved final maps? Like if we present the draft maps and they have two that they like, but they want us to combine them, do we have a responsibility to do that? Or will they go, okay, Leaf, just do this for us at that point? Because it's only a week before the 18th, or 10 days.
To answer your question, the best of my ability, the commission is still the advisory commission, and I would say your responsibility continues until the end of the process. But I agree that there will be a point when that final map is narrowed down, that at that point the staff would be finalizing the final map and publishing it, and there would not necessarily be any work for the commission to do, but you're still a part of the advisory commission and still would be coming to the board meetings and maybe be able to answer questions on how we got to the maps that we did, and provide any feedback to the board and comments to the board. The board wants to hear from this commission, the maps that you recommend, and they want to take that into consideration when they vote and approve the final maps.
Yeah, I understand all that, and thank you for clarifying. I just want to make sure that it's clear in all of our minds that whatever work we're going to do, it needs to be done by the 9th. It's not December 14th when our work is done. It's done by the 9th, so 9th of November. So that's a much shorter, it's a whole month less than we may have been thinking. Like when I read this, I thought, well, in my mind, I was thinking, oh, we have until the middle of December to figure this out, but we really don't. We have until November 9th to figure this out, to make what our recommendations are going to be. So I just wanted to make sure that we all had that clear in our minds.
Mary, please go ahead.
It's a lot of work, and I'm wondering if, I mean, not that I'm really excited about weekly meetings, but I'm wondering if the week of the 10th in October, we should have a meeting, so that, because it's kind of looking like October is our main time to be doing this work. So I'm putting it out there that perhaps one additional meeting the week of the 10th of October.
Do we have any comment on Mary's idea for a meeting week of the 10th?
I agree. We need a motion to add a meeting.
Yes, you do.
I move that we add a meeting the week of October 10th. If staff could let us know what day is best for everyone.
Okay,
I second the meeting. I mean, I second the motion.
so are we gonna vote on a meeting just that week, or do we want to try to set a date now?
I'm
I think
open
that's up to
anytime.
availability, maybe.
So Chair.
I always defer to staff because they're working overtime on this, but I'm available any day that week. So I'm happy to either set a date tonight or or defer it till the next meeting and set it.
Okay,
The October 11th is the council was that day, but I believe they, I'll leave it to Leaf and Charlotte too, to see what days that they're available. I could do any day that week.
so we
I'm available any day looking at that week that works for the staff and the commission.
leave.
We're talking about the 10th through the 15th that week. Yeah, I'm
Yes.
available whenever you want to
Yeah.
meet. So
What about the 14th, since that's a week from that, the 7th day?
Okay with staff.
This is Paula, and I am not available.
That whole week, that's that day.
12th or the 13th, is it? The 14th and 15th. The 12th and the 13th are fine for me.
We have the meeting on the 20th, which is a Wednesday, so we could do the 12th or 13th, and that would give us a week before that one. Tuesday or Wednesday,
How about the 12th?
works for me. Do we need to amend the motion to add the date?
Is the 12th is a Board of Supervisors Day? Is that a problem for Sherry?
Yeah, maybe the 13th.
We have a meeting on the 12th, Charlotte. We do not have a scheduled meeting on the 12th that I could see,
Okay.
unless there's a special. As of now, we do not have a board meeting that day.
That is correct. There's
Okay.
Dee, could you amend your motion to have the 12th?
I amend my motion to include the date of the meeting as Tuesday, October 12th at 6:15 PM.
What time?
6:15 PM.
Okay,
No problem.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second.
And then I will go through a roll call. Mary,
Yes.
Dee,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Paula,
Yes.
and Kyle, yes. Okay. I do believe that's a meeting. Is there any public comment on this item of adding a meeting?
No public comment.
Chair, we just had the proposed agenda topics for the upcoming meeting. We just rolled over.
There we go.
We had, and I added an update on prison population. And I think that is,
And then Charlotte was going to.
I'd recommend putting an item on the agenda for proposed maps consideration. Not that I know that anybody's going to submit a proposed map, but I think we're at the point now where people actually, based on what I've heard tonight, can start drawing lines on maps and submitting them to us. And I think there needs to be an item on the agenda going forward. We're going to get through this to consider any maps that are submitted, at least for discussion.
Charlotte?
And I would just add, we may want to just have maybe a standing item about that, but addressing that we wouldn't necessarily be able to start drawing maps publicly until we have that state adjusted PRISM data. So what we did tonight was sort of showed you how, with the current data that we have, how it looks when you move things around. But before we start telling the public this is how your map will reflect, we want to make sure we have that state adjusted prison data. And Leaf, correct me if you think I'm wrong with that, but I believe we do need to have that data before we do the official mapping. But we can certainly continue to receive, and we want to, and I think it would be a good idea to have an item where we're eliciting maps from the public so that we keep track of them. And then when we have that data, which could be any day now, then we're in a position to start doing that at the following meeting, perhaps.
So moved.
So Paula, did you have a suggested title for that agenda item that would be in compliance with the with your
Me?
Sorry, no, I'm getting tired.
Which
Charlotte, did you
Oh.
have a
I said,
proposed
take it.
wording for that agenda item?
I apologize. I thought you were asking Peter. I apologize.
No, it's
Chair.
I said Paula.
So I would say we could, I would recommend anything like receiving input from the public on receiving draft maps from the public, something to that effect. Although realistically, it could be as much as the same as our staff report on input received from the public, but maybe we want to encourage. I think one of the things we still want to also itemize is receiving communities of interest input. And we could say receiving communities of interest input, including any maps from the public. And that's broad enough where you're not requiring people, telling the public that they must draw a map to provide comment, but you're leaving it open to that.
Sounds good. Anything else we want to have on our next meeting?
Yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, I've made a motion. I think you need to have a second and then a vote
Okay.
to add that item.
And let's clarify the motion based on Charlotte's language.
Yes, I agree to Charlotte's language.
Okay. Do I have a
As maker
second?
of the-
I'll second.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Paula.
Okay, let's put it to a vote. Mary,
Yes.
Dee,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Paula,
Yes.
and Kyle, yes. Okay, do we have any public comment on our next, on adding things to the next meeting?
There's no public comment for that.
Okay. Well, I think we can adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Kyle.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank